Good evening. The June 3rd meeting of the Arundel County Council is now in session. Please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilwoman Pickard will lead us in the invocation this evening.
O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. Amen.
Amen. Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening again, everyone. Madam Secretary, please read the ethics statement.
The Ethics Commission has asked that I advise you that under certain circumstances, members of the public may qualify as lobbyists when they testify before the County Council. If so, the law requires that certain information be filed with the Ethics Commission. The Chairman of the Ethics Commission has asked that those present review the Ethics Commission information in the foyer of these chambers. If there are any questions about lobbying requirements, speakers should contact the Ethics Commission in the Heritage Office Complex on Riva Road.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We'll now invite members of the audience who signed up to address the council briefly on any subject not included in the printed agenda. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. I do not have a sign-in sheet. Is there anyone else that'd like to come forward and speak to the council? Ms. Johnson?
Julie Johnson, P.O. Box 6634, Annapolis, Maryland. I'm sorry to bother you guys again, but I need your help. I told you about how they fined me $500, stuck me with $45 in court costs because I failed to appear to a hearing that I didn't know about. And then because they didn't pay the money, then they have now charged me with contempt of court, and they've asked that the judge send me to jail. And so this is the kind of thing that gives a person like me some pretty serious nightmares, disrupts my sleep, my whole life. I get really agitated about these sorts of things. And there seems to be, this doesn't seem right. I sent you a document today that's old, it's from 2010, but it goes through the old history of how I bought this piece of road in 1977. My neighbors sued us in 78 for declaratory judgment. What are their rights? What are our rights? And so on. They have the right to use the road. I'm perfectly willing to share them. I learned that in kindergarten. Actually, I learned it before. But at any rate, and even if it weren't mandatory, you go through life and you want to get along with people, and generosity is good. But they didn't want to go by the court decision, and they haven't. And they have continued to park on the property, basically forever. We were able to interrupt it so they couldn't get adverse possession. But the litigation has gone on literally for decades, and it's not limited to litigation. It's threats, it's intimidation, it's vandalism, it's destruction of property, it's the threat of my life and family members.
Ms. Johnson, please summarize.
So it just doesn't seem right that I may go to jail, but they won't even give these neighbors a parking ticket. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Is there anyone else like to come up for invitation audience? Seeing no movement, the invitation audience is now closed. Is there any item any council member would like to place that is not on the current agenda? Okay, seeing no action, we'll move forward. May I have a motion that the partial reading of any bill, resolution, amendment to a bill or resolution, or minutes constitutes the reading of the whole?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed. The motion carries. Madam Secretary, please read the minutes of May 20th, 2019.
The meeting was called to order by Chairman Andrew Prusky at 7 p.m. and opened with the invocation given by Ms. Lacey, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 20th, 2019?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The minutes of May 20th, 2019 stand approved as read. Madam Secretary, please read the titles of bills to be introduced this evening.
Bill number 5119, an ordinance concerning the issuance, sale, and delivery of Anne Arundel County, Maryland general obligation bonds and bond anticipation notes. Bill number 5219, an emergency ordinance concerning current expense budget, Board of Education, supplementary appropriation and transfer of funds. Bill number 5319, an emergency ordinance concerning current expense budget, fourth quarter fund transfer and supplementary appropriation. Bill number 5419, an ordinance concerning zoning, workforce housing. Bill number 5519, an ordinance concerning fair housing.
Is there any additional co-sponsor would like to add in any of the bills?
Yes, thank you.
Councilwoman Rodian?
You beat me to the punch. If I could be please added, or if I could be added, please, to bill number 5519 as a co-sponsor.
Thank you. Any other additional? Very good. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of the resolution be introduced this evening.
Resolution number 2419, resolution appointing a member to the Anne Arundel County Ethics Commission.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We will now move to public hearing. That resolution will be taken care of at the end of the meeting. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 4619.
Bill number 4619, an ordinance concerning special community benefit districts cap on tax levy.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. This bill is sponsored by Councilman Volke. Turn it over to you, and then we'll hear from the administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, this bill, as it notes, deals with placing a cap on the amount that taxation can be assessed on special community benefit districts, as well as on the amount of increase year over year. This was a concern that I noted, again, when we started to dig into the special community benefit districts and the idea that these things can be changed pretty drastically. As we've seen from the Blue Note, there are instances where these are sometimes high two, if not low three-figure percentage increases, which is pretty substantial to taxpayers. Thank you.
Administration, Mr. Trumbauer and the crew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Trumbauer with the County Exec's Office. While we appreciate the sponsor's continued interest in SCBDs, we would ask the Council to reject this bill. We reviewed this. We feel that there is, that this sets really an arbitrary limit on SCBD tax rates. Communities are empowered by SCBDs to address their needs, and they have kind of the self-governing authority to do that. We do have some major concerns with the language in the bill. It refers to a property tax liability, but it doesn't define if that includes all county, state, and city taxes. It also doesn't define whether that would include the homeowner's tax credit, public safety officer, retired veteran, there are solar tax credits and things like that. And then perhaps just as importantly, this would be a pretty extreme administrative burden for our finance department and budget department to calculate what these are. And in fact, in the blue letter, I think it addresses that that the information wasn't readily available for the administration to comment, and that's exactly right. It would take a lot of work to determine these, and I'm sure you guys know that our finance department is already very busy doing their other considerable job duties. And then another kind of practical concern is that the current year's assessment from SNAT, that won't be available until after the tax bill is passed. So we're worried that the prior year calculations would need to be used. And the final concern is if there may be some existing SCBDs that if this were to pass, they would be in violation of the law. And then I guess is the expectation that they would have to reduce their rates, and then if they were paying for some community improvement and the debt service on that, what would be their remedy for that? So that's the main bullet points. I have with me a very esteemed panel here. We've got Tomi Adebo from Budget Office, we've got Karen McQuaid and Darcy Good from Finance, and we have Lori Klassmeyer from Office of Law to answer any detailed questions. Thank you.
Okay. Why don't we open it up for the public hearing? When I open the public hearing, remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. I do not have anyone signed up, but if there is not anyone who didn't sign up but still wants to come forward, please do so now. Seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on Bill number 4619 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 4619.
Bill number 4619, an ordinance concerning special community benefit districts cap on tax levy.
All right, now is the opportunity for additional discussion, where you stand on voting, whatever it might be. Mr. Councilman Volke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Auditor, I just wanted to ask did you have an opportunity to speak with the Budget Office to determine whether this would impose the types of administrative burdens that are referenced here in the blue letter?
Yes, so when I talked to Tommy, she said that they would have to add a field in the geocortex, which would take them, the IT person, 4 hours and to get the information, and then you would have to run reports for each SCBD, and that would be the 60 hours that I put in the...
Okay, and in terms of the costs of this, so we currently assess a 5% administrative fee on SCBD funds to cover the cost of administration, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
So for all revenue that comes in, there's a 5% administrative fee assessment to oversee the SCBDs, and it covers that expense. What was I going to say? So there's a $100 minimum, $2,000 maximum, but that's...
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask Ms. Adebo, good evening. The administrative burden, can you speak to that on the Budget Office, how much more this is going to add? Because as I understand it, typically the request is going to come in from the community, the SCBD community effectively, and they're going to say this is how much we want to do an assessment for this year. And if they know the law and they understand what the requirements are, how much more is that going to add for you all to be able to process those requests?
Tommy Adebo, Budget Office. It's one thing for the communities to know the law, but oftentimes there are a lot of volunteer individuals within the community that do the task, and they change board members often. So maybe this year's administrator follows and knows the law, but next year they may not be that knowledgeable. It's still up to the Budget Office to verify that they did in fact not exceed the 50% threshold.
Okay, all right. And are there currently any special community benefit districts that would violate this if passed currently?
Yes, sir.
Okay, which ones?
To my knowledge, the auditor referenced, I believe, 5, but when I reviewed it, I see 3 communities currently: Felicity Cove, Masons Beach, and Worthing Knolls.
Okay, and what provision specifically would they be violating?
The 50% threshold, so they are increasing their rate compared to last FY19 to FY20. Felicity Cove's proposed budget is going from $325 to $545.
Okay.
As one example.
All right. And, but other than that, are any of them in violation of the provision that their SCBD assessment cannot exceed 50% of their property tax assessed value?
I was unable to check.
Oh, okay.
Because of lack of data at the moment.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hare?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm wondering if there's a way that maybe this bill could address some of the administration's concerns. So on the definition of the tax liability, that seems to me like we ought to be able to come up with some definition working with the administration or otherwise to help define that. Did you have something in mind, or?
Councilwoman, our preference is for you to oppose the bill and reject it. So we're not trying to fix it. We think it's bad policy, but I wanted to point out that there are some practical concerns about definitions in addition. But if you were interested in trying to clarify that, and there was interest from the council in passing some version of that, of course we would work with you. But failing that, we would ask you to reject the bill.
Sure, understood. When you spoke, you gave a few reasons for believing that the bill was bad policy, let's say. So I'm just trying to see if there's a way to alleviate some of those concerns. The one that I heard sort of overwhelmingly was that this puts an arbitrary cap, essentially, on what they can be taxed. Am I understanding your comments correctly?
So my comments are referencing 50%. I don't know where the 50% came from. The sponsor can answer that, but I guess why not 40? Why not 60? I don't know.
Well, I guess my question is, I understand this bill that if a majority vote of the property owners would like to go above that, they can do that anyways. So in terms of a cap, I mean, it just sets a threshold at which you need a majority vote.
For that provision of the bill. But
Yes.
then the other provision, the 50% of the tax liability,
Okay.
again, our finance folks are here and are much better equipped to answer specifics, but I think there's also an equity concern there. You know, in Arundel, many neighborhoods may have a wide variance in the property values, right? So you have some very affluent waterfront homes, for example, but you get away from the water and you have more, you know, working class homes that are much less expensive. If you're taking the average of all those together, those very expensive homes may tilt that average to be high. So someone that's in a $250,000, $300,000 home, you know, 50% of their tax liability is going to be a lot different than 50% of a $2 million home. So that's another concern that we referenced when we said that the finance department or budget or someone is going to have to calculate the tax liability for each individual property owner in that SCBD. And for a large community, I'm sure that there's some that are multiple hundreds of property owners within some of these SCBDs. That is a pretty daunting task, I think.
Doesn't that almost suggest that we should have a maximum, though? That if you have these large waterfront homes that maybe can pay much more, and then you have some smaller, modest homes that can't pay, we should have a maximum so that the smaller homes are not sort of forced along to pay extra, pay more than they can afford.
Well, we defer to the communities, I think. They have bylaws. I mean, when you have an SCBD, you have bylaws that need to be adopted, and we would expect that communities would put appropriate thresholds in there. So rather than a one-size-fits-all, you know, state or county mandate, I think we would prefer that it's done by the community. I mean, the SCBDs are about, in many ways, self-governing and empowering the communities to be able to control what they want. So we would prefer that they're able to do that.
Is this something that we would typically see in bylaws where they've set a maximum rate or a maximum increase or a need for a majority vote or something?
Yes, it's generally governed in their bylaws. Most communities have something stated in their bylaws in regards to the fees.
Okay, so this would just sort of be a piece that they have to fall within?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you so much.
Councilman Volke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on the concern about the high income and the sort of lesser assessed houses, effectively with SCBDs, they have to be taxed at a uniform rate, right?
No.
So they could all be, so you could say the waterfront homes are going to be getting a higher assessment than the non-waterfront homes?
With the SCBDs, it can vary based on whether it's a uniform tax rate or based on assessment. So essentially, those in the waterfront homes, as the example that Mr. Trumbauer used, would essentially pay more if their home is valued at a greater amount.
Understood, but I'm saying whatever the assessment is, whether it's a fixed dollar amount or whether it's a percentage, for you to not have an equal protection problem of people similarly situated, you need to assess them all at the same either multiple or the same figure. Am I understanding that right?
No, you do not have to. I know we've had instances, and I believe it was Bay Ridge at one point, that we had varying tax rates. I could be wrong. I would defer to the law office.
Lori Blair, Class our Deputy County Attorney. Bay Ridge, I believe that was a shore erosion control district that was assessed differently, and and I can pull the information on that, but it had to do with the purpose of the project that was being financed in that district. And the other one I was just looking at, I know that there is, and maybe it's in here, I know there's a different rate. Okay. Amberley has a different rate, but again, I believe that's for their shore erosion district and not for their SCBD.
So do any of the SCBDs have different rates?
Not that I'm aware of. I believe everybody is. It's either, and they're either a uniform rate of assessment, a uniform assessment. Sometimes it's only on improved properties, sometimes it's on all properties, sometimes it's by platted lots, sometimes it's by tax account. It's whatever they've chosen their tax rate to be at the time of creation.
Understood. But it seems to dissipate the equity argument to me, because in a sense, there's this question of, well, the folks on the waterfront, they may be paying more. Well, naturally, they're going to pay more. You're using the same multiplier for them as you are for the lower assessed person. So effectively, you're assessing across the board equally. It may have a different impact on people.
I think has a
based on
different
that.
impact. Exactly. I think because
And I
that-
could see that, but I think
Yeah.
the fundamental fairness argument that's being made seems to be a bit misplaced.
Well, the median, if you're going to use the mean, and you have high-priced properties and you have lower assessed properties, that mean is a lot higher in relation to the taxes
Understood.
for the lower than it is for the higher. So there is a bit of an inequity in that those people in the lower assessed houses are bearing a little more burden than the people in the higher.
Right, but this is setting a cap, so currently there's no cap. So irregardless, or I should just use the word regardless, but regardless of whether or not someone is assessed up here or not, currently, we could levy a very, very high, or the community, I should say, could levy a very, very high SCBD, and there's nothing to stop them from doing that. And that would disproportionately, again, impact the lesser assessed home as opposed to the higher assessed home, theoretically, assuming that incomes correspond to property values, which they don't always. But so that seems to me like I hear that argument, but I also think it sort of misses what's actually happening here, which we're not saying you have to set your SCBD rate up here at the mean. We're simply saying that's the cap on it. You can't go any higher. Currently, it's unlimited. So arguably, in the absence of this, you could have even more of a fairness issue.
Well, the community itself is limiting. I mean, all communities that have SCBDs are required to have bylaws, as was stated, and the bylaws have provisions about how their budget is passed. So, and the law requires that everybody in the community get a copy of the budget. So if you are in the community and you oppose that budget, you oppose what that assessment is going to be, then you can come in and you can take steps through your governing document, being your bylaws, to oppose that assessment. So it's that self-governing notion that I think Mr. Trumbauer mentioned that is really what kind of controls where these numbers go. But I do appreciate the concern that people have that when it's kind of scary if one of these is forming in your community to think that they could just assess what they want to assess.
Sure. Thank you.
Councilwoman Lacey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there, how, if at all, would this bill account for, if it were to go into effect, the way properties are, the tax assessment is like 1/3 of the county per year, I think. So at some point under this bill, if it were enacted, or one of the issues you'd be trying to take care of would be figuring out at what point in time that property tax liability, is set at some amount versus what's phased in, or versus what credits people might have. Those are some of the questions I think are hanging out there. I don't know if anybody has any enlightenment about that, but the main thing that strikes me is that then with all of those questions, I think you fundamentally end up with communities being hampered in their ability to plan what they actually want to accomplish with their SCBD, because it's going to be harder for them to know how much their funding is actually going to be, from what I'm understanding. And that they also, as I understand the equity issue, what I perceive in this section D1 is that when you're using 50% of the mean individual property tax liability for all properties located within the district, two things. Number one, you probably I don't think we, in fact, I'd be surprised if we have a significant number of SCBDs that actually include a wide range of property values, where you would say it's completely different, which is going to throw off your idea of what the mean or the average is. And that if you assume that in general, SCBDs probably are within a closer range of their property values within the SCBD, then putting this into effect is going to actually widen inequities between communities, because you're now capping their ability to raise the funds for the projects that they want to do to improve their neighborhood. And yet, because you're capping it on property value, you're inherently saying that communities that are lower income, have lower income housing stock or lower value, I'm not saying the right thing that I mean, but that lower property values, they're never going to be able, by a percentage, to be able to raise what they have democratically, voted on and adopted to be able to improve their communities. So the net that I'm seeing here, I think this bill, I think it's not accurate to say that there's nothing to stop an SCBD from raising a tax above, 50% or to somehow sort of like sneak in a higher tax because, if that did happen, the community still needs only 50% plus one votes to terminate the SCBD. They don't need the 2/3 that we've already done. When I look at all of this together, I think what's happening here is death by 1,000 cuts. I think there may be a philosophical opposition to SCBDs. That's fine, but I am not inclined to just piece by piece take apart the SCBD regulations that we have in place, and that if it needs reform, we should look at the whole thing at once and stop this piecemeal stuff. That's my view.
Okay, any other discussion? We do have a technical amendment by council rules. Whether this passes or doesn't, the bill will be voted on tonight. So I just wanted everybody to know that. But Madam Secretary, could you please read amendment number 1?
This technical amendment conforms the purpose paragraph to the body of the bill.
Okay, this amendment's being sponsored by Councilman Volke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is just a technical amendment. Apparently, there was a notation that we needed to include these words "increase" in line 5 on page 1. So that's literally all this does.
Okay. Did I get a second on that? I'm sorry. My fault.
Was there a motion to adopt?
Yeah, is there a motion to adopt? My apologies. Motion number for amendment number 1. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. That was my bad. But we got it. Is there any further discussion on that amendment? Okay, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Volke?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 1 is adopted.
Okay, Madam Secretary, could you please call the roll on bill number 4619 as amended?
Ms. Pickard?
No.
Mr. Volke?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Nay.
Ms. Rodvian?
Nay.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacey?
Nay.
Mr. Pruski?
Nay.
2 in the affirmative, 5 in the negative. Bill number 4619 as amended is defeated.
Okay, moving along, Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 1919.
Resolution number 1919, a resolution endorsing financial assistance from the Maryland Economic Development Assistance Authority and Fund to Paragon Bioservices, Inc.
Okay, is this Mr. Trumbauer? Trying to get you out early, but...
No, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Trumbauer for the county exec. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Walker because this really came about through his office and he's best prepared. And I know how excited he is to be back in front of the council sitting in this seat.
Thank you, Mr. Trumbauer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. If you'll recall, I did send an email towards the end of last week and asked for feedback and questions, and a number of you reached out to me, so I appreciate the questions and phone calls. In short, this is a partnership between our office and the Maryland Department of Commerce with regards to Paragon Bioservices, a company that's located here in Anne Arundel County, is expanding their operation and continuing to grow, which we are excited about. In our office, their projected growth rate is to approach close to 500 jobs by the end of this year, and these are high-paying jobs that are in the $90,000 a year range. The company has approached the Maryland Department of Commerce and received indication that the state will support a loan to them for $1.3 million. Previously, it was approved in the last council term for $600,000 support from the county, and with that $600,000 was a 10% match that's required by the county through the Economic Development Association or corporation, and the council approved that. And so we're back with the increase from $600,000 to $1.3 million. Requires our 10% match to go from $60,000 to $130,000, and we're asking for your support on that resolution. So I'll entertain any questions if there are any, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Volkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Walker, as I call you, Councilman Emeritus. Quick question for you. This is a...
I don't think he did call you that, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bauer.
Why does he get to be councilman?
I don't know.
I have to work on that.
We'll clear the record later. Councilman Volkey.
Can I go back and amend the minute? No, I'm kidding. Mr. Walker, just to make sure that I'm clear on this, so there is no actual budget appropriation that you're requesting with this because you all have this money in fund balance, so you can already fund what we're talking about.
Correct. We're doing this as part of our workforce training grants that we offer to businesses here in the county. We have this appropriation already in our budget from the previous or in the current year. This does not affect or impact the budget that's in front of you. This will come out of our current budget. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walker. We'll now open to public hearing. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Rabia.
I lit up late.
Yep.
Where are they located?
They're in District 1.
All right, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Well, let's open up for public hearing. I do not have anyone signed up. Is there anyone that did not sign up that wish to speak on Resolution 1919? All right, seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing of Resolution number 1919 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Resolution number 1919.
Resolution number 1919, resolution endorsing financial assistance from the Maryland Economic Development Assistance Authority and Fund to Paragon Bioservices, Inc.
Okay, any other discussion? Councilwoman Lacey?
Yes, I just wanted to report to my fellow council members that I had a conversation with Mr. Walker to see, okay, so if we provide the $70,000, where's it really going to? And I understood better that funding, since it's going to essentially the community college for workforce development, to me it seemed like it's a net, in a sense, it's a net investment for the county. And so with that, I'm comfortable supporting this resolution.
Thank you, Councilwoman Lacey. Seeing no further lights and discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Resolution number 1919.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution 1919 is adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read the title of Resolution number 2019.
Resolution number 2019, resolution approving the reappointment of Brian E. Riddle as a supervisor of the Arundel Soil Conservation District.
Okay, Ms. Schultz.
Thanks. Kaylee Schultz for the record from the County Executive's Office. Resolution 2019 reappoints Brian Riddle to a second term as supervisor of the Arundel Soil Conservation District. He is president and CEO of Homestead Gardens. His appointment expired on March 31st, 2019, and if this resolution is adopted, he will serve on this board until March 31st, 2024. You should have his resume in front of you.
Okay, any questions on this resolution? All right, seeing none, we'll open this up for public hearing. I have no one on the list signed up. Is there anyone who did not sign up wish to speak on Resolution 2019? Seeing no movement, the public hearing on Resolution 2019 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Resolution number 2019.
Resolution number 2019, resolution approving the reappointment of Brian E. Riddle as the supervisor of the Arundel Soil Conservation District.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Resolution number 2019.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution 2019 is adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read the title of Resolution number 2319.
Resolution number 2319, resolution confirming a nomination to the Board of Trustees of the Public Library Association of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, Incorporated.
Ms. Schultz?
Great. Again, Kaylee Schultz for the record from the County Executive's Office. Resolution 2319 nominates Deirdre Ann Hendrick to the Board of Trustees for the Public Library Association for District 5. She has over 20 years' experience as an attorney and extensive work in governance, particularly in cybersecurity governance, an area that has been in particular concern for the library over the past year. Additionally, she and her family have lived in Cape St. Clair for the past 7 years, and the library has become the most important part of their community life. If nominated, she will serve a 3-year term beginning upon final appointment by the Board of Trustees. You should have her resume in front of you.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, let's open this up for public hearing. I do not have anyone signed up. Is there anyone who did not sign up wish to speak on resolution number 2319? Seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on resolution number 2319 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 2319.
Resolution number 2319, resolution confirming a nomination to the Board of Trustees of the Public Library Association of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, Incorporated.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 2319.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution number 2319 is adopted.
Okay, we will now consider an act on resolution number 2419. This is an appointment, so this can be voted on the same evening. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 2419.
Resolution number 2419, resolution appointing a member to the Anne Arundel County Ethics Commission.
Okay, Ms. Schultz?
Great, thank you. Kaylee Schultz, again for the record for the County Executive's Office. Resolution 2419 appoints Dale Kelberman to the Ethics Commission. He is a Democrat, a resident of Murray Hill, and a retired attorney. Before retiring in 2010, he practiced law for approximately 36 years in Maryland as a prosecutor and in private practice. He was involved in numerous cases involving ethical issues affecting public officials, such as financial disclosure requirements and related matters. If approved, Mr. Kelberman would serve a 4-year term ending on April 30th, 2023. You should have his resume in front of you.
Any discussion? Councilman Volkey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening.
Good evening.
Quick question for you.
Sure.
Did the gentleman that I assume it's a gentleman that he's replacing, Mr. Stokes, did he
Yes.
put in to be reappointed to the Ethics Commission? Was he considered? I'm just curious.
He was reconsidered for reappointment. We are willing to put Mr. Stokes back in once another Republican spot has opened. However, with due diligence to ensure the commission is reflective of the county executive wishes to appoint Mr. Kelberman at this time
Okay.
to replace Adger.
So the purpose of this is basically to replace a Democrat with a Republican?
Vice versa.
Oh, other way around. That's what I
Yes.
mean. Sorry. Democrat, Republican with a Democrat.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure I understood. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, any other further discussion? Let's open this up for, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Councilwoman
I'm
Rodvian?
always late. Just to clarify, it's required by the rules of the Ethics Commission that there's balance politically, correct?
Yes, you can
Okay.
either have 4 of one and 3 of the other.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is there anyone that'd like to come forward to speak on resolution 2419? Seeing no movement in the audience, we'll move forward. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution, or excuse me, any further discussion before we go on? All right, good. Madam Secretary, please call the roll of resolution 2419.
I'll read it in for a vote first.
Okay.
Resolution number 2419, resolution appointing a member to the Anne Arundel County Ethics Commission.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Nay.
Ms. Fiedler?
Nay.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
5 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative. Resolution number 2419 is adopted.
Okay, is there any other business to be brought before the county council?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Lacy.
I meant to, at the beginning of the meeting, I'd request to be added as a co-sponsor on Bill 5419.
5419 for
Yes,
the record.
please.
Are we
Thank
good?
you.
Madam Secretary, with that?
So recorded.
Okay, thank you. Any other further business to be brought before the county council? Councilman Volkey?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The county council is now adjourned until June 17th, 2019. Thank you and have a good evening.